We are here because the ILO and Gallup got together for a report. The report is called Towards a Better Future for Women and Work, Voices of Women and Men. You just missed a panel, but you haven't missed the conversation with Eva, which is sort of like the aftermath.
The aftermath.
The after show, the aftermath. Yeah. When I introduced you, first of all, I said businesswoman, activist, producer, director, actor. What on earth are you doing here? It's still a relevant question for people joining us now on Facebook Live.
No, I mean, this is my life's work. I'm here because I'm a woman. And as a woman who's had experiences in this world, not only as a businesswoman, but as a family member, as a sister, as a stepmom, as a daughter. And the great thing about this study is that it's a collection of all of these voices throughout the world that give you the real story, the human stories behind these statistics. So you can say, 73% of men and 87% of women, but when you talk to what does that statistic mean, and you're taking down that oral history, it's important because it's important to humanize issues so that people understand. I remember, if you told me a statistic about dolphins in Japan, I would have been like, blah, blah, blah. But when I saw The Cove, the documentary, it changed your perception. And that's what these studies have to do, and especially when it comes to gender equity in the world. And so many of the studies the finds of the study weren't surprising, but when you put a narrative on it and you put it in a context, you go, oh, interesting.
So the survey included men and women. It wasn't just about women and their attitudes to working, but also men as well. What struck you about that?
Well, because if you're truly going to advance gender equality, you have to include the mindset and voices of men. And that's not a patriarchal statement. That's the truth. And if we're going to make sustainable, effective change, we need the help of men to do that as well. And I think it was Jim who said, Dr. Gallup's quote was, what was it? It was so good. If democracy is about the will of the people, then we have to find out what the will is. And that's what the study does, is finds out, okay, so what are your thoughts? Do you want the woman to work outside the household? Hey, women, do you want to work outside the household? And really getting to the truth of what we think women want. Instead, we want to know what women want.
And Jim Clifton is who's the head of Gallup, which is where we are right now in Washington, D.C. If you have questions for Eva Longoria about women at work, International Women's Day, anything that's on topic, you can actually put it on the bottom of Facebook Live, and if it's really good, I will actually read it off my iPad. Connecting up with the work that you do and what you've heard about women in the workplace. Internationally from this report. Where are your connections? Where are you going, I see that in my work?
Yeah, so many places. First of all, the fact that the United States has one of the largest gender wage gaps, and we're a developed country, that there were some undeveloped countries in the study that had a closer pay equity. And you go, how is that possible? We're the United States. Latin American countries in this study, men, almost over 90%, men and women accept the choice of a woman working outside of the home. And so I was talking on the panel today that we shouldn't be surprised about that, because some people associate Latin American countries with this machismoism and you're the woman and you stay home. But that's not true. Actually, it's an economy in which all family members must work. So it's not like, oh, we support you going out of the household. It's we need you to go out of the household. And not only mom is going to go out of the household, but the kids are going to go out of the household. And what that does is it takes a low wage job for today in exchange of future economic mobility. And so that's dangerous. And that's what keeps the cycle of poverty in these countries, is lack of education.
There are a lot of questions about this is where we are right now. This is where we need to get to. And particularly for sort of equality between men and women and the gender pay gap, 70 years is how long it could take. But you're working on issues like this all of the time. What are you doing? Because I think the takeaway from this is, so what can we do What are people doing? What are you doing?
There's a lot of things you can do, and there's a lot of things that people are doing. The one thing I say is if we're going to talk about equal access to jobs for women, you have to start that conversation with equal access to quality education. With the jobs that are coming available now, with the STEM fields are in such high demand and going unfilled. For every STEM graduate that comes out of school, there are 2 jobs waiting for them. So this isn't an industry that typically has women. Women are pushed out at an early age by either sexism, or once they do make it through higher education in the workforce, they are the only woman of 28 men on a project team. And so there's a lot of things that we have to do to create this new emerging industry to include women into it. And that's what my foundation does, is help women get into the STEM fields. And then, there's also companies that are doing great jobs. I have some of them here. Staples just committed to eliminating their gender wage gap and removed visible and invisible barriers for women's advancement. Pepsico, who of course has one of the first major companies to have a woman on, not on the board, but also the CEO, Indra, who is dynamic and amazing. Pepsico and Target have come together to try to have an industry-wide campaign at achieving 50-50 gender parity in retail and consumer goods workforce. That's huge, because that's what we need. We need policy making, and we need the government to do its part, but we need the private sector and companies and corporations to do their part, and then these companies are kind of doing it. Intel just has an initiative at increasing the number of women and minorities to join the company, again, a STEM company.
So as you're going through this, let me just share some of the questions that people are asking.
Are you getting questions already?
Yeah. From Ray. Hello, Ray. How far have we come towards achieving gender equality in industries like show business in the last 10 years?
Great question. Yeah. Not great.
What can you say? What do you feel comfortable about saying?
Oh, no, it's not. I'm not comfortable about saying everything because it's very public. There was a big campaign 2 years ago at the Oscars, which was hashtag Oscars so white because of the lack of diversity. And then there was a hashtag Oscars so male for the lack of female directors and lack of women. So my industry, we not only face sexism in the last decade. Of the 1,000 films, the 1,000 biggest commercial movies made in the last decade, 4% of them were directed by a woman. Of the 40 drama TV pilots this season, 1 was directed by a woman. And so we have the sexism, and then we also have ageism. We in my industry, we are stamped with an expiration date, and then they're like, "Thank you, next, bye, next."
Hello, 23-year-olds.
And so it's only part of the problem, but luckily we have collective bargaining. We have an amazing union that helps us get this done.
Can show business unions actually help in terms of sexism? Can they ageism? Because that's difficult.
Well, here's the thing.
Because the director could just say, "Oh, I wrote the part for so and so." But in a business, you could you feel like you could push a little harder.
Yeah, but the great thing about SAG and AFTRA is studies like today. So they came out with a study that showed these statistics that people go, "Of course there are female directors. Of course there are women in front of the camera." But when you look at the statistics, you go, "Oh, not really.
Right.
Oh, the needle has not moved." And so you need them to put the research in to present it to the industry so that the industry changes. Again, we can depend on policies and stuff, but if it wasn't for Pepsico going, "We're going to do this," if it wasn't for Staples going, "We're going to do this," then there's not a lot of change that's going to be done.
There's not repercussions, though. If you do that, are you a troublemaker now? You are a troublemaker.
I think our industry is full of.
You're an activist / troublemaker.
No, I think that our industry is
like,
used to loud.
Are we done yet?
Loud voices. Loud voices. Our industry is used to loud voices, but definitely that was a very good question because there are those dynamics.
All right, Ariadna, thank you for your question. What do you think about Latin America and the women at work there How can we promote their empowerment in their careers? Quite broad.
Yeah, that's a broad question, but what I spoke about today in reference to the Latin American countries was, even though, don't let the statistics fool you, because even though there's a high quantity of women working in Latin America, there's a high quantity of women in the workforce. So you might look at that country and go, women are doing great. But what kind of jobs do they have? You know, the report calls it vulnerable employment. Are they physically safe? Do they have safe transportation to and from their job? Once they're there, do they experience any kind of exploitation, lower wages, sexual harassment? And a lot of these women do in Latin American countries. There's not a lot of protections for them. And so we have to make sure that we provide that infrastructure in Latin America and capitalize on the desire of women to work. They want to work. They want to be empowered. They want to have financial independence. So let's provide that infrastructure so they can do it.
There are going to be people watching right now on Facebook Live with Eva Longoria at the headquarters of Gallup in Washington, D.C.
International Women's Day.
International
We're
Women's
wearing
Day.
our red.
Absolutely. And for the launch of Towards a Better Future for Women and Work, Voices of Women and Men. Okay. You can Facebook Live us. But they're going to be really surprised at what you're saying and wondering, what are you basing it off? You're extremely knowledgeable about this topic. Where do you get your information from, your experience, your knowledge from?
Listening to people. I think that's what's so profound about this particular study and the work that I do with my foundation and going around the world is talking to the people. I mean, just talking and collecting data and listening to what they need, what they want, as opposed to assuming. And I think that's the best thing that we can do as an activist. Politicians do it, should be doing it. I don't know if they do it, but listening to their constituents. Boards need to listen to their constituents. Companies need to listen to their employees. And so that's a really big...
What's the pushback that you get when you say, this is important, equality is important? What do people say back to you where you think, oh, it's not going to be that easy?
I think people, the institutional constraints, it's never been done that way. We don't really do it that way. So we're going to do it this way. We're like, yeah, well, we're going to do it this way now.
Right.
Yeah, so I think, you know, institutionalized racism, sexism, ageism, discrimination, there's a lot that's just embedded in the way we do business, and
so
you got to change that.
So one that comes to mind where you can just quote it. It's one where you're like, oh, why did they even say that? Why did they think that? Is there an example
in the study?
No, from your work. As you go
around. I've experienced that a lot of times. I remember, actually, I was directing, and I remember a DP, a cinematographer, telling me, "You're really good for a woman," and I go, "Thanks." What does that mean? So, you know, things like that are said all the time, and they're unconscious.
Everyday sexism.
Sometimes they're unconscious, and sometimes they're conscious. It's biases that you don't know sometimes you don't know you have them.
Ross Hardy asks, what is the main source of
Ross
action?
Hardy! He's from Australia. He's
Hello.
a fan of mine. He's a friend of mine, and I missed his birthday. Happy birthday, Ross. I love you.
So Ross says,
what does he say?
What is the main source of action that can be taken to help women get equal pay and opportunities that men do?
Yeah, it's hard. It's a hard question. It's not hard.
Is it confrontation?
It's a definite. It's not confrontation. It's conversation, and a conversation of action. So not just talking about it, but like let's move the ball forward, right? And so in our country, you know, we passed the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, but how do we enact it? How do we enforce it? How do we make sure that there's consequences to companies and employers who don't have equal pay? As you can see, I listed so many companies who are already doing it. So you can't say, well, it can't be done. No, it can. People are doing it. It's not as hard as you think.
What's your biggest takeaway from being on the stage here at Gallup today?
Oh my gosh, that there thank God there's an organization like Gallup doing this kind of work. Thank God there's journalists like you who are bringing attention to this work. All the
And
people on the
ILO, of
panel.
course, because it was a Gallup ILO.
Yep, Gallup and ILO.
Report.
Thank God that the ILO is looking into the role of women all over the world. I just get so excited to be in these rooms where there's an overlapping of interests. Sheila from Care.com, Jim from Gallup, the people from ILO, me as an activist. Like, there are many aspects to this problem, to this issue. You should hear all of those different perspectives.
What do you think if we're watching this on Facebook Live and we're looking at this and we're thinking, yes, International Women's Day, I get it, but how does this make a difference in my everyday life? What is something that you can do practically that might change some of the findings that are in this report?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. Again, listen to people, listen to your coworkers.
Work-life balance was a big challenge, wasn't it?
Yeah, work and life balance. One of the things I tell people is press your politicians. Don't just sit back and wait for the policy to be made. Go and demand it. We need more women's voices in the political process. We saw the amount of people that came out to vote this past presidential election, but we need that momentum, and we need the Women's March that happened, and we need today that's happening. We need to continue that momentum and move it from a movement into change.
Yeah.
It can't just be a day that we all wore red.
Yeah.
It has to be more.
That's what bugged me as I picked my outfit today. I was like, it's got to be more than this.
Yeah.
But at least people know what I'm thinking,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Part of it is becoming aware, which is what this study's about, making people aware of the statistics. And now, what do we do? What's the prescription?
From Elisabetta, were you always an activist for women's rights? When did you start advocating for this?
I started very early because I come from a family of activists, a family of charity workers. I knew the word volunteer at a very early age. I didn't even know it meant you don't get paid. I was like, I want to be a volunteer when I grow up, because the word was thrown around so much in my household. We grew up with volunteerism. Most of it stemmed from my older sister, who has special needs. And so we were kind of born into her world of Special Olympics and community programs and child care that was difficult for my mom, and balancing. And so it was just expected of us to give back, because we took so much from our community. We had to give back. And so I started very, very young.
Because is there a moment when you realised you were an activist? When
I didn't know what it was called.
Yeah, but an active activism. So I remember when I was a little kid, I put on my fridge a list of things that my mother couldn't buy from South Africa because of apartheid. So I was telling my mum where she couldn't shop. My mum was like, why not? It's like, because of apartheid. And I was like 9, and I didn't realise I was /brat/activist. So that was, I think, my first act of activism.
Yeah.
What was yours?
Yeah. Probably marching on the state capitol in Austin, because I'm from Texas, and holding a sign. But just because my family took me there, I didn't know what I was doing, and I just knew I was holding a sign, and I was marching for some bill that was going to slash funding that would have affected my sister. And I just who was taking money from my sister? That's what I thought.
Yeah.
I thought this person personally was taking money from my sister, which, by the way, at the end of the day, is exactly what that was.
Yeah.
It's not this, abstract government. No, you personally are taking away this opportunity from women, from my sister, and it was, I just remember that being very mad. I don't know about what, but something about my sister.
No one messes with my sister.
Yeah.
For Marley, what can we do every day to ensure that as women, we're actively ensuring our equality? So when somebody says, you're quite good as a director for a woman, what do you say?
I'm just better. I'm more prepared. I'm better educated than that person. I want to one up them. And unfortunately, we have to do that. We have to be twice as good, twice as smart, twice as prepared. But I don't mind it. I welcome the work. I love the work. I don't sit back and go, this is unfair. You just have to keep moving forward. I mean, in my life, and that's totally my opinion. What do you think? What do you do every day?
I think that people have fought for us to be where we are, to have what we have. And the least I have to do is just say something, stand up and say something. I haven't had to sit at a counter. I haven't had a water cannon pounded at me. I just have to open my mouth and say, that's not okay. You said that, because sometimes people will say things about other people because you're not in that particular group, they think it's okay.
Yeah.
And I have to say,
No.
no. I have to, when I see someone being bullied, I have to do something, say something, so that all the work that's come before us is not wasted. Although I think right now it feels like maybe the 60s again. It feels like we might actually have to not just say something, but do things now.
Yeah, I just read an article saying that there's more segregation in schools today than before the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
And it's
and lots of issues, not just about racism, but
social
also
justice.
Social justice, about
women's
different
rights,
faiths. And
everything's being
there's
rolled
a
back.
whole list
Yeah.
of things.
There's so many things being rolled back, and all of our advances being attacked in so many ways in social justice. And it is a very dangerous thing, because once you pass a certain milestone, you go, great, whew, done that, we fought that war, now we're on the other side, and now we're fighting that same war again. And that's odd.
Last question from William. Which woman did you most look up to in your life, and why? And what's the most important thing that they taught you?
Yes, my mom. Everybody thinks...
What's she like?
Oh, she's amazing. Well, she raised 4 girls, one with special needs.
She's a saint.
Was a full-time teacher.
4 girls.
4 girls, full-time teacher, one with special needs. She was a special education teacher as well, and still had dinner at on the table at 6 o'clock every day from my father. And I just look back and I go, how does she do all of it? Oh my God. And she says, I just did. Like, you figure it out. You have to get it done. And so every time I look at my life, I'm like, I'm not doing enough. My mom did so much more than I'm doing at this point in my life. But yeah, I really looked up to my mom. She's the hardest worker in the room. She gave me my work ethic. She taught me about my community. She said, never forget where you come from. She kept me grounded. And then my sisters, all my sisters are my role models. People always think that I'm going to say some famous person, and the truth is I never had to look far for a role model. I was surrounded by powerful, educated, independent women.
Are you comfortable with knowing that people were looking at you and thinking of you in very similar ways that you look at your mum? Mm-hmm. Are you comfortable with that? Are you okay with being that role model for other people?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I embrace it. I embrace being a role model because I always say you can't be what you can't see. And if people can see themselves in me and possibly say, oh, I can do it, then that's a win.
What is your takeaway from today, this ILO Gallup report on the voices of women and men about women in the workplace? You spent time, you made notes, you sat on stage, you did a panel, you did a Facebook Live, and your takeaway is what?
Yeah, I said this on stage, and I said today is not about getting the message out, it's about getting the message in, okay, into the hearts of our brothers, our fathers, our uncles, our sons, and into the minds of politicians and policymakers and gatekeepers who can really create the change that we need for women in this world. And so oftentimes people make the mistake, because I don't, but they make the mistake of speaking for women. I'm going to speak for women when I say this, and I'm going to speak for the Latino community when I say this. I don't speak for anybody. I speak for myself, and I encourage others and my community to speak for themselves. You should speak for themselves. Speak up, like you said, say something. I can't say it for you. You have to say it, and you have to say it, and you have to say it. And I think that's what today is about, looking at the study, looking at the information, and then saying something about it.
Signing off from Facebook Live. Thank you for your company.
That's it. Bye, Facebook Live.